Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? She sat there, still, alert, notebook open, pen poised, but no one called her name. Not once. Orders were given, sectors assigned, overwatch positions declared. Her name wasn't on a single list. Not even for backup. 19-year-old specialist Adina Clara stared straight ahead. Pretending not to notice, pretending it didn't hurt, pretending her hands weren't clenched under the table, because if they saw her flinch, they'd use it against her again. 3 months into her deployment at Forward Base Crimson, and she'd already been labeled emotionally unstable, not combat suitable. That label stuck to her like cold sweat, no matter how many perfect shooting scores she racked up, no matter how many patrol routes she memorized or tactical diagrams she submitted. They all saw the same thing, a girl who cried during a training exercise and didn't have the stomach for combat. But there was something they hadn't seen, not yet. Adina's alarm had gone off that morning at 05:00, but she'd already been awake, listening to the bass hum through the walls of her steel-framed quarters. Her room, barely more than a cot, a locker, and a dented desk, was colder than the outside air. Photos from home sat in neat lines. Her parents in their village garden, her grandmother with arms full of firewood, her younger brother laughing through a missing tooth. She tightened her boots methodically. She always moved like this, focused, precise. Her instructors at the European Defense Coalition's Academy had said she was a natural shot. One of them had even whispered she was the best they'd seen in 5 years. Didn't matter, not here. At Forward Base Crimson, technical skill wasn't enough. It was all about control, emotional lockdown. No fear, no tears, just steel nerves. And because she hadn't mastered that part, they'd shoved her into the background. Communications, inventory, cleaning optics, she should have been looking through. She tried harder every day, studied harder, ran drills at night when no one was watching. At 03:00, when most of the base was dead silent, she ran obstacle routes she'd mapped herself, lifting weights built from water canisters, measuring her heart rate between each sprint and cooldown. But none of that made her visible, not where it mattered. She remembered the briefing from her second week. Simulated ambush. Everyone took hits, fumbled their gear. But Adina, every shot on target, every call sign confirmed. But her cheeks had been wet, not from fear, from the pressure, from wanting it so badly. That was all it took. Sergeant Major Williams had said it in front of the whole squad. Crying doesn't stop bullets. An emotional soldier gets people killed. She never forgot those words. She folded them up inside her like a warning flare. Yet, every day, her fingers itched for the trigger. Her eyes scanned terrain maps for positions she'd never get to cover. And her mind had never stopped calculating crosswinds, elevation, line of sight, threat indicators, everything they didn't think she could do. She was already doing in secret. And the worst part? She was right about all of it. Operation Night Watch. She'd pre-identified sniper lanes along the valley ridge. Rodriguez missed them twice. They were lucky the enemy didn't exploit it. Still, no one asked her for intel next time. Operation Guardian Shield? She briefed them on likely ambush points from archived patterns. They sent her to handle the radios. A convoy was hit. Casualties. Preventable. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She just went back to her room and stared at the wall, quiet, alone. But that night, she moved her maps closer to the lamp. If they wouldn't see her, they'd feel her one day. They just didn't know it yet. Every piece of intel that crossed her desk, she studied. Every intercepted comms message, she decrypted and logged. She built profiles, patterns, enemy behavior charts. It was unofficial, unauthorized, unseen. And then came the rifles. She used training rounds legal, target dummies after hours legal. But her grouping radius? 5 centimeters at 600 meters. Illegal levels of good. She didn't brag. She didn't film it. She didn't tell a soul, not even Jensen. the only soldier who treated her like she belonged. "You know what scares them?" He'd whispered once. "You're not what they expect. That makes you dangerous." Adena smiled, but only faintly. She wasn't trying to be dangerous. She was trying to be ready. Every moment they pushed her out of position. Every night they shut her out of mission briefings. They made a decision, and she made hers, because she knew something they didn't. She wouldn't need permission to be the one they turned to. She'd just need the right moment. And when it came, when the base alarm screamed through the pre-dawn silence, and 200 enemy soldiers crept through a route no one had expected, except her, she didn't hesitate. She moved like clockwork, grabbed her gear, laced tight, checked her weapon, rushed through the shadows as the base shook under the first waves of fire. And when they told her to stay on comms, she didn't listen, because for the first time, the moment had come. The moment they'd feel what they refused to see. And Adena Clara? She was ready to show them exactly what emotional soldiers are capable of. Why were they falling back already? The command center was chaos radios barking orders, boots thundering across concrete, tension thick enough to taste. On the main display, red blips spread like infection across the perimeter. Enemy fire poured in from the eastern ridge, the sector most vulnerable, the sector she had warned them about months ago. But now, it was too late to revise the plan. Captain Muller's jaw was set like stone as he spoke into the comms. "All station Sector 4 is lost. Initiate fallback to inner defensive perimeter." Adena sat, frozen at her assigned post in communications. Headphones on, notepad open, watching in real time as her predictions came to life. Only no one knew she was the one who'd seen this coming. And no one was calling her name. Thompson was down, Rodriguez silent. Private Chun's panicked voice cut through the headset. "We've got multiple snipers on the ridge. I can't see them. They're too far. We're getting torn apart out here." Adena's chest tightened. She'd been to that ridge 100 times. In her mind, in her maps, in her dreams, she knew the ranges, the angles, the elevation corrections. She had firing solutions memorized for every rock, tree, and thermal dead zone on that stretch, and now they were all being used against them. She turned to Captain Mueller. "Sir, I can take the tower. I can see the ridge from there. I can hold them off." The answer was immediate. "Kurt, negative. Return to your station." Kovac didn't even look up. "This is not a time for emotional responses, Clara." Emotional, always that word. Even now, with friendly positions collapsing, wounded screaming, and the base on the edge of being overrun, they still saw her feelings. Not her skills, but it wasn't about her anymore. It was about Jensen, Chun, Martinez. It was about holding this base until reinforcements could arrive. The numbers didn't lie. 43 defenders, over 200 attackers, reinforcements. At least 6 hours out. They wouldn't last 2, unless someone changed the math. Her hand trembled, but not with fear, with clarity, decision. The tower. She'd mapped every route, timed every ladder climb, knew the firing arcs from its top deck better than any blueprints. And they hadn't found all her gear. After the tribunal, after they'd confiscated her materials and locked her into comms duty, she'd hidden a second scope. Extra rounds. The real rifle, the one she'd modified herself. She didn't wait for orders. She waited for an opening. When Sergeant Major Williams turned to reassign someone to ammo detail, she slipped away. Quiet boots, quiet breath. Through the rear access corridor, past the barracks, into the shadows of the tower, its steel frame rising like a promise. She climbed without pause. Not for adrenaline, not for glory, for survival. Not just hers, everyone's. The top deck gave her what the ground never had, perspective, and from there, she saw it all. The eastern ridge was alive with muzzle flashes. Precision fire. Professional soldiers, not rebels, not conscripts, trained shooters. Using coordinated bursts to pin down the base, she found the first sniper within seconds. Positioned behind a broken pine, 437 meters out. Adjust for wind. Dial for drop. Exhale. Slow trigger pull. The shot cracked through the air like lightning. The figure slumped, spotter gear falling from their chest. No celebration, no pause. Just calculation, one down, many to go. They didn't know she was up there, not yet. She had seconds before they realized, before they started hunting her position. So she moved. Sidestep, crouch, new angle. Target 2. Observer, giving hand signals, 389 meters. Wind shifted, click drop, silence. But not below. Down at the base, defenders were lifting heads, noticing the change. Enemy fire was breaking. Pressure easing. Command, this is Sector 6. A voice crackled over the radio. Enemy suppression just lifted. We're repositioning. They didn't know why yet, but she did. Her third shot rang out just as return fire began hammering the tower. She ducked, counted seconds, shifted again. The enemy was adjusting. Smart. They hadn't expected counter-sniper fire from within the base. She kept moving. Precision under pressure. Fourth target squad leader. 5-second window. Gone. Her body was drenched in sweat. Her heartbeat loud but steady. This wasn't panic. This was purpose. All those nights training alone. All those whispered lectures from her grandmother about channeling emotion, not killing it. It was working. They'd called it obsession. She called it preparation. Sector 4, fire pressure easing, another report said. We're re-establishing cover positions. She could hear it, not just on the radio, but in their voices, hope, flickering, fragile, but growing, and she was the reason. Enemy return fire intensified. They had triangulated her position. She felt the rounds strike metal, inches from her ribs. She didn't flinch. She pivoted to the northern face. A harder angle, longer shots. She recalibrated, even as shrapnel nicked her vest. Her fifth shot stopped a machine gun team laying suppressive fire near the med tent. Her sixth tore through an enemy trying to mark artillery coordinates. Time blurred. 9 kills. Then 11. 13. She stopped counting when she reached 15. Didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the silence, the shift, the unraveling of their coordination. And then through her scope she saw him, not a sniper, not a scout. The commander, standing on a slight crest, gesturing orders, surrounded by radiomen and field leaders. If she took him, the spine of their assault would snap. But the shot? Nearly 500 meters, concealed angle, narrow window. One chance, she inhaled. Let the sound of chaos fall away. Her finger pressed down. The enemy commander crumpled before he hit the dirt. And just like that, the battle changed. Below, the radio exploded. With calls, enemy movements are disorganized. They're falling back on the ridge. Sniper support is gone. Advance. She allowed herself one breath of relief, then reloaded, because this wasn't over. She'd stepped out of the shadows. Now, she had to hold the light. How long could one soldier hold back a tide? Adana didn't ask the question aloud. She already knew the answer. As long as it took, smoke drifted across the base as scattered enemy fire still echoed from the ridge. But their rhythm was broken now. No more synchronized bursts, no more clean advances. The commander's fall had sent a crack through their coordination, and she could see it widening with every passing minute. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Her fingers loaded another magazine. 12 rounds left, 12 chances to save lives. She shifted positions again, crawling along the metal struts of the tower, her chest scraping against cold steel, body low, movement silent. Below her, the defenders were regrouping. She saw Jensen crawl to a new position behind sandbags. Bruised but alive, Chun was dragging Martinez to the triage tent. Their faces were tight with urgency, but there was something else there too, belief. They didn't know who was covering them, but someone was. She'd become their ghost on the ridge. The enemy, though they were adapting, Adina spotted new figures with radios near the tree line. Backup commanders, runners. They were trying to reassemble their control structure. Get the assault moving again before it unraveled completely. She took aim at the first. A lean man crouched behind a log, whispering into a throat mic. He thought the shadows covered him. He was wrong. Her shot hit before his sentence ended. One less voice giving orders. But they were smart. Learning. Now. The radio operators were moving in pairs, covered by decoys and smoke screens. She adjusted. Slower now, more careful. Each shot had to mean something. Not just a casualty, but a delay, a disruption, a crack in their strategy. Because time was the real battle. Each minute she held them back brought the sun higher in the sky. Each minute brought reinforcements closer from Base Delta. Each minute gave wounded soldiers a chance to breathe, to bandage, to crawl behind thicker walls. But her own position? It was getting worse. The tower groaned under her. Not from structural damage yet, but from the relentless pounding of return fire. Enemy marksmen had finally zeroed in. Bullets sang past her ears. One shattered a railing near her leg. She didn't panic. She moved. Again. North face. Reload. Reacquire. The emotional pressure was mounting, but in a strange way. It grounded her. Every ache in her shoulder reminded her she was still alive. Every bruise from crawling reminded her why she was doing this. She thought of her grandmother's voice. Soft but resolute. Those who feel deeply fight hardest for what matters. A breath. A blink. Target acquired. This one was different, a squad moving an ammo crate toward a heavy weapons position. If they made it, they'd have the firepower to punch through the western perimeter. She aimed for the front man. Shot. He dropped. The rest scattered, abandoning the crate in confusion. That was the real win. And yet, her rifle was almost dry. Only 5 rounds left, and the battle was shifting again. Enemy units, realizing the eastern ridge was compromised, were rotating toward the northern slope, less defended. Still vulnerable, her position couldn't cover. That angle, not well enough. She'd need to reposition, but the risk was high. Her radio crackled. It was Jensen, his voice ragged but clear. Sniper support, whoever you are. Thank you, but we've got movement on Sector 3. They're flanking us. We're exposed. Adina's throat tightened. They don't even know it's me. She could have said something, identified herself, claimed the credit, demanded respect. But what mattered now wasn't recognition. It was coverage. She glanced at her watch. Reinforcements were still hours away. Too long she had to hold the flank. Below, shadows crept across Sector 3 figures. Darting between brush, moving with practiced speed, she saw flashes of scopes. Glints of glass, more snipers, more of what she'd been fighting off alone. She didn't hesitate. Adina swung herself down the tower's side hands, burning against the ladder rails. Boots slamming rung after rung. She hit the ground running. Rifle hugged close, moving through narrow alleys between buildings. Avoiding sightlines, heart pounding but steady. She passed the triage tent. Martinez lay inside, blood-soaked but stable. Chun nodded at her in confusion, recognizing her only as the girl from Coms. He didn't stop her. She reached her hidden secondary position, an abandoned maintenance outpost, near the base's northern wall. From there, she had a narrow field of vision on Sector 3. Not ideal, but enough. She crawled to the ledge, set her bipod, and peered through the scope. They were already advancing, 5, maybe 6 hostiles. Moving in a leapfrog formation, smart, aggressive, and fast. She exhaled. Wind, 8 kilometers per hour. Correction. 2 mils shot. The lead man folded instantly. The others dove for cover, but they hesitated. That was all she needed. Shot 2. The one carrying. Signal flags. Shot 3. Suppressing fire on the furthest one, forcing retreat. Shot 4. Headshot at 376 meters. 1 round left. She paused. Scanned. A flicker in the trees. There an officer, peeking out. trying to rally them. You're the one keeping them together. She took the shot clean. Silence followed. Her rifle clicked. Dry 29 shots, 29 confirmed impacts. She lay there, chest heaving, fingers trembling around the empty magazine. And then, cheers, shouts, voices in the radio exploding with energy. Enemy retreating on Sector 3. We're pushing them back. Where's that fire coming from? She smiled, just a little, then crawled back into shadow. Let them think. It was a ghost. Let them wonder, because this wasn't over yet. And if the enemy came again, she'd find more ammo. She'd find another ridge. She'd find a way. Because some soldiers don't wait for permission. Some just protect what matters. No. Matter what it costs. Why didn't they stop her? Adina moved through the base like smoke, quiet, fast, unstoppable. No one dared get in her way. Maybe they were too stunned by the battle, too focused on survival, or maybe they just sensed it, that whatever she was doing, it was working. She ducked into the West Barracks and found what she needed. A fresh case of match-grade rounds ammo she had helped inventory weeks ago. The irony bit deep. All this time, she'd been trusted to count bullets, but not fire them. Now, she was both armorer and weapon. The radio crackled in her earpiece. Reports flooded in, one after another. Sector 6, secure. Medical tent is stabilized. Enemy command structure disrupted, but the voices weren't relieved. Not yet. The tone was cautious, confused, because no one knew how it had turned. Just that it had. She reloaded her magazines on the move, fingers working from muscle. Memory, each round slid in with a soft, metallic click, sound she now associated with choice, with control, with the singular clarity that comes when everything falls away except the moment. She headed for her final position, the storage annex. Rooftop, it was a risk. Minimal cover, exposed lines. But perfect elevation to finish the job. The last pieces of the assault were unraveling, but some enemy elements had dug in, refusing to retreat. Trained soldiers didn't run just because things got hard. They adapted, and they had one last strategy. Force chaos, so they turned their focus on the med tent, the heart of the base. Sniper fire returned with brutal focus, trying to pin down medics, pick off the wounded, and demoralize anyone still fighting. Adina couldn't allow that. From the rooftop, she had line of sight on the ridgeline and the final forward observer. Still giving hand signals through the brush, she lined up her shot. But just as she steadied her breathing, Clara, she froze. The voice behind her was low, firm. Captain Mueller. He was standing at the top of the roof ladder, arms crossed, helmet off, expression unreadable. I figured it was you, he said. She didn't respond. Couldn't. Not until she took the shot. The trigger pulled clean. The observer dropped like a marionette with cut strings. Mueller stepped closer. I counted at least 29 confirmed kills, he said quietly. From one shooter, tactical precision, strategic target selection, command disruption. She finally turned toward him, rifle lowered. You're here to arrest. Me? He paused. No. Another step forward. I'm here to ask you how the hell you did it. Adina blinked. Was this real? You disobeyed direct orders, he continued. You violated chain of command. You took a sniper rifle into an unauthorized position and used classified terrain analysis we confiscated from your quarters. Her pulse surged, and you saved. This base. The silence between them wasn't tense. It was raw, human. She saw the fatigue in his eyes, now not just from battle, but from something deeper. Doubt, maybe, or guilt. You weren't wrong, she said softly. I did it. I prepared without permission. I studied what you ignored. And I cried when it hurt. But none of that stopped me from being ready. His eyes searched hers for a long moment. And then the briefest nod. You changed everything today. Specialist Clara. She swallowed hard. That doesn't mean I didn't break the rules. It means, he said, that sometimes the rules are wrong. Then he turned toward the horizon, where enemy forces had finally vanished into smoke. And Trees, you held off 200 trained soldiers with one rifle and no authorization. I don't even know what the protocol is for that. She gave him the smallest, tired smile. There probably isn't one. He let out a dry chuckle. There is now, below them. The base came alive again, not with panic, but with order, coordination. Medics tending to the wounded. Engineers reinforcing the walls. Soldiers walking upright instead of crawling. Alive instead of buried. And they were looking up at the tower now, at the rooftop, not to see their officers, but to find the one who had held the line. Chun stood near the west wall, bandaging Martinez's shoulder. He caught her eye, saluted once. No words, just respect, recognition. Jensen, leaning on a crutch near the coms post, offered a nod. His lip was split, his face bruised, but his voice, when it came through the radio, was steady. Whoever fired those shots. You saved my life. She didn't respond. Didn't need to. Her actions had spoken. And as the sun rose over the burned hills, casting long shadows through forward base crimson, Adna understood something she'd only hoped for until now. She wasn't the girl on the sidelines anymore. She was the reason they were still standing. Why didn't May know sooner? That was the thought that haunted her, not the gunfire, not the silence afterward, not even the look she received as she walked back across the compound. It was the realization that they could have avoided all of it. The blood, the fear, the desperate fallback orders. If someone had just listened, but no one ever did. Until now, the dust hadn't settled yet. Medics were still pulling wounded from broken walls. Engineers scrambled to reinforce the defenses. The enemy was gone, but the memory of them lingered in bullet holes and shattered glass. And Adna? She was no longer invisible. Captain Mueller had ordered an after-action debrief that evening. No time to wait for higher command. They needed to understand what had happened and how the base hadn't just survived, but won. She stood at the front of the room, rifle cleaned and slung over her shoulder, flanked by officers who, hours earlier, had labeled her a risk. Now they looked at her like something else entirely. Maybe not a hero, but no longer a question mark. Mueller spoke first. This is Specialist Adna Clara. Communications duty, equipment maintenance, previously restricted from tactical operations due to concerns about emotional resilience. He let the words hang. Today, she eliminated 29 enemy combatants, including their commanding officer, 3 radio operators, and multiple sniper teams using terrain knowledge and firing solutions she developed independently over 3 months of self-directed training. Silence. Then Lieutenant Kovac cleared his throat. You had all that analysis? Those ridge lines, sniper nests, dead zones, you identified them alone? She nodded. It started as mental exercises, then became a routine. I couldn't afford to be wrong if the chance ever came. Major Harrison leaned forward. And the weapon system? Modified regulation rifle. Match-grade scope I requisitioned under the guise of optics testing. Ammunition from excess training stock. Williams shook his head slowly, voice low. We thought you were hoarding gear for some kind of meltdown. Adna looked at him. I wasn't breaking down. I was preparing. Because if something went wrong, I wanted to be the one who could do something. No one spoke for a moment. Then Mueller stepped closer. And the tears? The emotion? She didn't flinch. Still there. Always will be. Her voice tightened. But I've learned to use it. You were right, Sergeant Major. Feelings don't stop bullets, but they don't jam the rifle either. Somewhere in the back, Jensen muttered under his breath. Damn right. A ripple of half-smiles passed through the room. Then Captain Mueller leaned forward. What would you have done if you missed? Adana didn't hesitate, taking another shot. The answer hit like a bell, clear, centered, unapologetic. Outside the debriefing room, Base Crimson was beginning to breathe again. Supplies were being restocked. Reinforcements were en route now that the region was secure. No more chaos, no more alarms. But something else had shifted too. Respect didn't come all at once. It came in glances and shorter silences when she walked by, in the way Rodriguez stepped aside to let her pass at the mess hall, and how Thompson, bruised and tired, handed her his optics and said, "You probably know this scope better than I do." It came from Chun too. He found her in the barracks later that night, holding a small bundle wrapped in olive canvas. "I think this belongs to you," he said, placing it on her bunk, her confiscated tactical map. She stared down at the pin-marked ridges, the color-coded sniper lanes, the tiny notations in pencil. "You kept this?" He shrugged. Didn't feel right throwing it away. She looked up. His eyes weren't mocking. They were proud. "You saw things we didn't." Adina hesitated. "You never doubted me, Chun." He smiled. "Didn't know what you were, but I figured anything that focused couldn't be nothing." For the first time in months, her breath came easy. But one person still hadn't said a word. Sergeant Major Williams. He approached her the next morning, hands behind his back, posture as rigid as ever. "I'm not going to apologize for my expectations," he said flatly. "Emotions in combat do get people killed." She waited calm, steady. "But so does arrogance." He added, "And I was arrogant. Thought I understood what strength looked like." His eyes met hers. "Turns out, sometimes it cries before it fights." She didn't smile, didn't nod, but the silence that passed between them was enough. That evening, Mueller summoned her to his office. "Regional Command wants a report. We're writing you into it officially." She blinked. "I thought disciplinary action?" "There's a discussion," he said carefully, "but it's shifting." She sat straight, spine taut. "What does that mean?" "It means they're not sure what to do with a soldier who breaks every protocol and ends up being the reason 43 people lived." Adina lowered her eyes. "I accept whatever comes," she said. "I made my choice." He studied her. "And would you do it again?" Adina didn't pause. "Yes, even if it meant never wearing the uniform again." Mueller leaned back. "I think you just earned the right to keep it." Why was her locker suddenly unlocked? When Adina returned to the barracks the next morning, the padlock she'd installed regulation issued, always triple-checked, was hanging open. The metal door stood slightly ajar. No damage, no pry marks, no sign of forced entry. Just unlocked. Inside, her belongings were untouched. Manuals, photos, her grandmother's letters. But something was missing. Not gear. The silence, because next to her locker, folded with precision, was a new set of fatigues, her name stitched clean. Across the chest, and beneath them a patch she'd never worn before. Designated marksman, assigned, official. Her fingers hovered over the fabric, unsure whether to pick it up or just stare a little longer. She hadn't earned it through the right channels, hadn't gone through the courses. The certifications, the checklists they all trusted, she'd done it backwards, quietly, alone. But here it was. She picked up the patch. The thread caught the light. Later that day, during the briefing, Captain Mueller didn't read out assignments the old way. No rosters pinned to the board. No split-second decisions made in quiet dismissal. He stood tall, hands folded behind his back, and looked straight at her. "Specialist Clara," he said in front of everyone. "Sector 4, Overwatch. You're our primary for the operation. No hesitation, no conditions. Just trust." The room didn't erupt into applause. That wasn't the culture. But heads turned, chin lifts, silent nods. The kind of acknowledgement she'd once thought impossible when she stepped out of the room. It was Jensen who caught up with her. "Hell of a turnaround." "Huh," he said, falling into step beside her. She nodded. "Feels strange. Like I'm still walking through a dream that hasn't collapsed yet." "You earned this," he said, serious now. "Everyone knows it. I'm not sure everyone agrees." She said, "Maybe not, but they will." And maybe that was enough that night, as she prepped her rifle for the first official mission she'd ever been assigned. She found herself going through the motions with a new kind of calm. No more hiding gear and floorboards. No more midnight obstacle drills or whispered breathing patterns by lamplight. Now, everything was above board. Sanctioned, accepted. But oddly, it didn't feel easier. It felt heavier. Because when they finally gave you the shot, they expected you to make it count. The mission, codenamed Silent Winter, was a patrol cover operation for a multinational medical convoy threading through contested hill country. High risk, minimal. Visibility, limited extraction routes, exactly the kind of situation she'd trained for. They deployed before dawn. Cold air clung to her gear, and the frost turned every branch and leaf into glass. She moved with the patrol, breaking off 2 clicks from the convoy to set up position on a ridgeline she'd studied 3 months earlier during her self-initiated analysis binge. Back then, it was theoretical. Now, it was real. Rodriguez was her secondary, Thompson her spotter. Both had been among those who once questioned her. Now, they watched her for cues. "How far can you see from here?" Thompson asked, settling beside her. Adna checked the scope. "Out to 700. Anything beyond that and we're gambling." "Copy that." No ego, no posturing, just trust. Then the crackle. Came radio chatter ahead. A potential ambush. 2 hills over. They needed Overwatch to confirm. She didn't hesitate. 2 hostiles. Near the broken pine. 3rd, elevated spotter with range-finding gear. "Confirming," Thompson said. 3 seconds later. Visual match. Rodriguez adjusted. "You want lead, Clara?" "No," she replied softly. "I already have it." She exhaled. The scope framed the target. Her finger rested gently on the trigger. 3 shots, 3 threats neutralized. And just like that, the ambush scattered. Radio chatter exploded in her ear. "Convoy safe, hostiles disengaging, route is secure. Back at base." The report would read clean. No injuries, no loss of equipment, no delays, standard op. Successful extraction. But that wasn't the real victory. It came when Sergeant Major Williams passed her in the corridor that evening. He didn't stop, didn't salute, but he said 5 words, soft, graveled. I would have missed that shot. It landed harder than any metal, and then came the letter. 2 days later from command headquarters, it came sealed, with red tabs, and was hand-delivered by a NATO liaison officer, to Specialist Adna Clara, 4 Base Crimson. Subject: Formal review of performance during Operation Eastern Hold. Summary: following the engagement on classified date, where Specialist Clara engaged and neutralized 29 enemy combatants without authorization, command has completed its inquiry. She paused, held her breath. Conclusion: Specialist Clara's actions, while in violation of command protocol, directly contributed to the survival of coalition forces stationed at 4 Base Crimson. Her tactical analysis, marksmanship, and autonomous initiative are now recognized as exemplary. No formal punishment will be issued. A commendation for valor is under review. Furthermore, effective immediately, Specialist Clara is to be reassigned to the 1st Advanced Reconnaissance Marksman Unit. Adna blinked. She read the last line again. Then, a 3rd time, she looked around. The room was empty. No one to celebrate with, no medals pinned, no fanfare. Just her. And the letter. She folded it once, slid it into her journal, took a slow breath. This wasn't a win. It was a beginning. Why did stepping off the transport feel heavier than combat? The ramp of the shuttle hissed as it lowered, metal groaning under the weight of tension and fuel fumes. The insignia on her arm was new. Her rifle? Cleaned twice in the last 3 hours. Her order sealed, official, final burned quietly in her pocket. Adina Clara stepped into the staging area of Base Sentinel, headquarters of the 1st Advanced Reconnaissance Marksman Unit. The Ark, it was where the elite went, the ones who didn't miss. But no one greeted her. No honor guard. No friendly nods. Just clipped boots on concrete, curt glances, and clipped words in 5 languages. This was where the myths lived, and she was here because of what she did at Crimson, but also because she had disobeyed. They hadn't forgotten. Neither had she. She was led through 3 security checkpoints before being handed her bunk assignment and schedule. No introduction, no orientation, just the expectation. Show up, shoot clean, stay silent. Her first day started before dawn. 20 targets, 15 degrees of elevation. Wind machines randomized per round. The kind of test designed to shatter confidence before it ever took root. The instructor, a Norwegian captain with glacier eyes and no discernible pulse, handed her the rifle and nodded to the range. No words. The first shot hit dead center. Then the second. Then the rest. Her grouping was tighter than protocol required. Beyond qualification, the captain wrote a single word on his clipboard: precision, and walked away. By week's end, she had no friends, but no doubters either, which, here, was the same as respect. Still, at night, in the silence of her new quarters, she found herself staring at the same thing she'd always kept close her. Grandmother's letters, the folded commendation letter from Crimson, and now, a single photograph of Sector 4 the morning after the battle. Not a shot of herself, just the ridge, the silence after fire. That's what she remembered most. Not the gunfire, not the kill count, the silence afterward. Her second week, they sent her on a field op. Classified details: urban terrain, intelligence, retrieval, unknown enemy presence. She wasn't lead, not yet, but she was Overwatch. It was different now. Sanctioned, coordinated, real-time communication. Support teams, fallback positions, and yet something still gnawed at her. The op went sideways, like they always do. Intel was wrong. The building wasn't empty. The target wasn't unarmed. One of the team private Hellas broke cover exposed, sprinting across open terrain to pull a wounded teammate from a collapsing stairwell. A shot rang out, not from the enemy, from her. Enemy shooter down before anyone else even saw the glint of a scope. Hellas turned, bleeding, and looked back toward the ridge. He raised his hand, one finger to his helmet, a silent thank you. They extracted. Mission success, clean report. But in the debrief, the commander's words were cold. Shot was outside your designated sector. You took a risk. She nodded. And I saved 2 lives. That's not the point. She looked him dead in the eye. It is to me. The room was silent. Later that night, in the mess, Hellas found her. You ever miss? She shook her head. Not when it matters. He sat beside her, pulled out a deck of cards, dealt them like it was normal. That was how it started. Small cracks in the armor of the ARC. By the end of the month, they weren't calling her the emotional one anymore. They were calling her Clara or just Ace. The name stuck. Not officially, not in reports, but among the ones who'd seen her hold the line, who'd watched her fire through pain, who trusted that if she was on the ridge, they could move forward. And still, she carried the question with her. Why did it take nearly breaking the system to be seen? Why did she have to bleed through silence and shadow, crawl through command dismissals, train in secrecy, to finally wear the patch they now respected? And yet, would she change it? No, because the truth was simple. She was built in that silence, forged in that disregard, molded not just by pressure, but by the refusal to let it change who she was, emotions and all. One night, after a quiet op, she received a transmission from Forward Base Crimson. The message was short. Thought you'd like to know Sector 4, now called Clara Ridge, official redesignation. Jensen. She stared at the screen for a long time, then closed her eyes. Because names fade, records blur, but ridges, they last. Why didn't she feel victorious? She stood in full dress uniform under the pale lights of Command Hall 4. Rows of officers flanking the long, sterile aisle. Medals gleamed under the spotlights. Cameras flashed quietly. A citation was read. In 4 languages, She barely heard any of it. Adina Clara had just become the youngest soldier in ARC history to receive the Cross of Tactical Valor, and she felt hollow, not because she didn't believe in what she'd done, but because she knew if things had gone the way they were supposed to, none of this would have been necessary. The room rose in a standing ovation. Her name echoed down the hall. Applause filled the chamber, and yet all she could think of was 4 base crimson. The gravel, the cold, the sharp smell of gun oil and scorched metal, the helplessness in Jensen's voice, the raw decision to disobey, to act, and the silence that followed. After the ceremony, she returned to her quarters, now upgraded, larger, private, and laid the medal on her desk. It looked out of place, too shiny, too ceremonial. She reached into the drawer and pulled out something else. The old terrain map of Crimson. Faded, creased, still marked with pins. She spread it out, careful not to smudge the graphite lines. Then she took the medal and laid it gently over Sector 4. Her ridge, Clara Ridge, not because it was about her, but because someone had survived, because she had been there. She didn't need to be remembered. She just needed it to matter. That evening, a young recruit knocked on her door. Barely 18, uniform too stiff, boots too clean. She looked terrified. "Ma'am," the girl stammered. They said, that you might be willing to teach me on your off hours." Adina raised an eyebrow. "Teach you what?" "Not just shooting," the girl said. "Everything." And for a long moment, Adina said nothing. Then she stood, crossed the room, and opened her locker. From the back, she pulled a worn notebook, the one she'd filled in secret tactical. Theory, range calculations, breathing cycles, terrain stress markers. She handed it over. "You'll write your own," Adina said softly, "but this might help get you started." The girl's hands trembled as she took it. "I heard that when no one would let you do the work, you did it anyway." Adina smiled. "It wasn't courage," she said. "It was necessity." The girl blinked. "But weren't you afraid?" Adina looked out the window. Night was falling across the training fields, the stars just beginning to return. "I was terrified," she whispered. "Every second." The girl nodded slowly. "Then how did you do it?" Adina turned back to her, eyes steady. "Because fear doesn't mean you're broken. It means you care. And if you care enough, you don't wait for permission." Later that night, she stood alone on the training range. No targets, no pressure. Just a rifle, the wind, and the open dark. She lined up a shot, even though there was nothing to fire at, just to feel the balance again, the control, the silence. And then she lowered the rifle, because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts, and sometimes the greatest strength a soldier can carry is everything they were once told to leave behind.